On a winter morning in February 2006, in the small borough of Roaring Spring, Pennsylvania, a woman named Cathy Ensor left her home to run errands. She was 42 years old, a mother, a neighbor, someone people waved to at the grocery store. By nightfall, she had vanished. Her car was found abandoned on a rural road, keys still in the ignition, driver's door left open. Inside the vehicle, investigators discovered her purse, her cell phone, and a grocery list written in her own handwriting. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no body, just the cold February wind moving through the open door of that empty car. For nearly 2 decades, the question hung over Roaring Spring like morning fog that never burned away. What happened to Cathy Ensor? Roaring Spring sits in the heart of Blair County, Pennsylvania, cradled between ridges of the Allegheny Mountains. Population just over 2,500. The kind of place where people still left doors unlocked, where everyone knew everyone else's business, where the local diner served as the town's unofficial information center. Main Street ran straight through the borough, lined with buildings from another century, their brick facades weathered by 100 winters. The Roaring Spring itself, the natural spring that gave the town its name, still flowed through the center of town, its constant rushing sound a backdrop to daily life. The Ensor family lived on Morrison Street, a quiet residential block where children rode bicycles and neighbors tended small gardens in summer. Cathy had lived in the area most of her life. She worked part-time at a local medical office, handling administrative duties 3 days a week. Her husband, James Ensor, worked at the paper mill just outside town, a job he'd held for nearly 15 years. They had 2 children, both teenagers by 2006. Their daughter was 17, their son 15. Those who knew the family described them as ordinary, unremarkable in the best possible way. Cathy attended church on Sundays. She volunteered at the school library. She grew tomatoes in her backyard every summer. February 14, 2006. Valentine's Day. The morning arrived cold and overcast, temperature hovering just above freezing. A gray sky pressed down on the mountains. Cathy woke at 6:30, the same time she always did. She made coffee in the kitchen while the rest of the house still slept. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. Steam rose from her mug. She had the day off from work but had planned to run errands. The refrigerator needed restocking. She wanted to stop by the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. Small, ordinary tasks that fill ordinary days. Her husband left for work at 7:15. He kissed her goodbye in the kitchen. Later, he would remember that she was still in her bathrobe, her hair not yet done. She told him she planned to shower and head out around 9. Their daughter was already at school. Their son had stayed home that day, claiming he felt unwell. He was upstairs in his room when his mother finally got ready to leave. At approximately 9:20 in the morning, Cathy Ensor backed her blue Toyota Camry out of the driveway. A neighbor across the street, Margaret Wells, happened to be looking out her window. She saw Cathy leave. She noticed nothing unusual. The car pulled away and disappeared down Morrison Street. It was the last confirmed sighting of Cathy Ensor alive. The grocery list found later in her car included milk, bread, eggs, chicken breast, and laundry detergent. Basic items. She had apparently planned to go to the supermarket first, but her car was found nowhere near any store. Instead, at approximately 3:30 that afternoon, a local farmer named Donald Keffart was driving his truck along Old Route 220, a winding rural road that connected several small communities south of Roaring Spring. He noticed a blue sedan parked at an odd angle on the shoulder, driver's door hanging open. He slowed down, thinking perhaps someone had car trouble, but no one was there. Keffart pulled over and approached the vehicle. The keys dangled from the ignition. The engine was cold. He peered inside and saw a woman's purse on the passenger seat, a cell phone in the cup holder. The radio was off. He noticed grocery bags in the back seat, but they were empty, still folded. A receipt lay on the dashboard, time-stamped from a gas station in Roaring Spring at 9:47 that morning. Kefart felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. Something was wrong. He used his own cell phone to call the police. Blair County Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes. Deputy Thomas Garrett was first on scene. He documented everything methodically. The car sat approximately 30 feet from the edge of the road, wheels turned slightly to the right as if it had pulled over intentionally. No skid marks. No signs of collision. The surrounding area was wooded on both sides, thick with bare trees and undergrowth. The ground was hard, partially frozen. Deputy Garrett walked the perimeter, searching for footprints, for any disturbance in the brush. He found nothing definitive. Just that car, door open, engine cold, completely abandoned on a lonely stretch of road. By 4 o'clock, investigators had identified the vehicle's owner, Cathy Ensor. They contacted James Ensor at the paper mill. He arrived at the scene within the hour, his face pale, his hands shaking. He looked at the car and said nothing at first. Then he said, "Where is she? Where's my wife?" No one had an answer. The immediate search began at dusk, even as daylight faded. Volunteers gathered at the Roaring Spring fire station. By 8 o'clock that evening, more than 60 people had assembled. They divided into teams, equipped with flashlights and reflective vests. The temperature was dropping. Deputies organized a grid search of the woods surrounding the location where the car was found. They called out Cathy's name into the darkness. Their voices echoed off the hillsides. The only response was silence, and the distant sound of water rushing over rocks in a nearby creek. The search continued through the night and resumed at dawn. Bloodhounds were brought in from a neighboring county. The dogs picked up a scent near the car but lost it after approximately 50 yards into the woods. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the dense forest with thermal imaging. Nothing. Dive teams searched the creek and a small pond half a mile away. Nothing. Days became a week. The week became 2 weeks. Posters with Cathy's photograph appeared on telephone poles and in store windows throughout Blair County. Her face looked out from those posters, smiling in a family photograph taken the previous Christmas. Part 2. The investigation. The investigation intensified as the search for Cathy Ensor yielded no results. State police joined the effort. The FBI sent agents to assist, given the possibility of abduction. Investigators began the painstaking work of reconstructing Cathy's movements on the morning of February 14th. The gas station receipt found in her car became a crucial piece of evidence. Security footage from the station showed Cathy pulling in at 9:43. She pumped gas, went inside to pay, purchased a bottle of water and a pack of gum. The footage showed her alone. No one approached her. She appeared calm, unremarkable. She left at 9:47. From there, her route should have taken her either to the supermarket in Roaring Spring or to the pharmacy. But old Route 220, where her car was found, was in the opposite direction. It was not on the way to anywhere she had planned to go. Investigators questioned her husband extensively. James Ensor sat in interview rooms at the Blair County Sheriff's Office for hours at a time. He answered every question. He provided alibis, phone records, financial documents. He had clocked in at the paper mill at 7:45 that morning and had not left until he received the call about Cathy's car. Multiple coworkers confirmed his presence. Surveillance cameras at the mill showed him at his workstation throughout the day. He had no criminal record, no history of domestic disputes. Neighbors described the marriage as stable, even happy. Yet something felt wrong to the investigators. Deputy Garrett noted in his report, Husband showed appropriate emotional distress initially, but within days exhibited unusual composure. When discussing wife's disappearance, maintained steady eye contact and showed little physical signs of ongoing distress. Those who knew James Ensor said he was always calm, always controlled. He was the kind of man who fixed problems rather than panicking about them, but some found his demeanor troubling. At the press conferences organized to publicize Cathy's disappearance, James stood beside the sheriff and read prepared statements. His voice remained steady. He thanked the volunteers. He asked anyone with information to come forward. He did not cry. He did not break down. Some people interpreted this as strength. Others whispered their doubts. The Ensor children were interviewed separately, with appropriate counseling support present. The daughter, whose name was withheld from public records due to her age, told investigators her mother had seemed normal that morning. A little tired perhaps, but normal. She had left for school at 7:30 and had not seen her mother after that. The son, who had stayed home that day, told a similar story. He had been in his room most of the morning. He heard his mother moving around downstairs, heard the shower running around 8:30, heard the garage door open around 9:20. He had not gone downstairs to say goodbye. He had assumed she would be back soon. Investigators combed through Cathy's life looking for anything unusual. They examined her computer, her email accounts, her phone records. They found nothing suspicious. No secret relationships. No financial problems. No threatening messages. Her medical records showed routine care, annual checkups, nothing alarming. Her coworkers at the medical office described her as reliable and pleasant. She had no enemies that anyone could identify. She lived a quiet life in a quiet town. The timeline troubled investigators. From the gas station at 9:47 to the location where her car was found on Old Route 220 was approximately 12 miles. That drive should have taken 15 minutes, perhaps 20 given the winding roads. But her car had been found with a cold engine at 3:30 in the afternoon. Where had she been for nearly 6 hours? Had she driven somewhere else first? Had she met someone? The odometer reading suggested she had driven approximately 15 miles from the time she left home. That roughly matched the distance to the gas station, and then to where the car was found, with perhaps a few miles of additional driving. But 6 hours remained unaccounted for. Investigators developed theories. Perhaps she had pulled over to help someone and been taken. Perhaps she had witnessed something and been silenced. Perhaps she had simply walked away, though nothing in her life suggested she would abandon her children. Each theory had problems. There were no witnesses, no evidence of anyone else being present, no ransom demands, no body. Search teams returned to Old Route 220 again and again, expanding their search radius. They searched abandoned buildings, old wells, mine shafts that dotted the area from the region's coal mining past. They dragged sections of the Frankstown branch of the Juniata River. They brought in cadaver dogs. Weeks became months. The media attention that had initially been intense began to fade. Other stories took precedence. Cathy Ensor's face appeared less frequently on the news. By summer, the active search had effectively ended. The case remained open, but investigators had exhausted their immediate leads. The file sat on Detective Lisa Morrison's desk at the state police barracks. She had been assigned as lead investigator in March, and she refused to let the case go cold in her mind, even as the physical search wound down. She reviewed the evidence repeatedly. She called James Ensor periodically to check in, to see if anything had changed, if he had remembered anything new. His answers were always polite, always cooperative, always ultimately unhelpful. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves. Some believed Cathy had met with foul play at the hands of a stranger, a random act of violence in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others looked at the husband. The statistics supported their suspicion. When a woman disappeared, the husband was often involved, but statistics were not evidence, and James Ensor had an alibi that appeared unbreakable. The case slowed. The file grew thicker with dead ends, and in the Ensor house on Morrison Street, life continued in a strange, suspended way, as if waiting for something that might never come. Part 3. The Silence. 15 months after Cathy Ensor's disappearance, in May 2007, James Ensor sold the house on Morrison Street and moved with his 2 children to a rental property in Altoona, approximately 20 miles from Roaring Spring. He told neighbors he needed a fresh start, that the house held too many memories. The daughter had graduated high school by then and planned to attend community college. The son was finishing his junior year. They packed their belongings into a moving truck on a Saturday morning. Neighbors watched from windows, but few came out to say goodbye. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the terrible weight of suspicion without proof, the years that followed in the Ensor household would have been familiar. The silence in that new rental house was not peaceful. It was the silence of things unsaid, questions unasked, fears unvoiced. The daughter went to classes during the day and worked evenings at a retail store. She came home late, went to her room, closed the door. The son played video games for hours, the electronic sounds filling the house with noise that prevented conversation. James maintained his routine. He transferred to a different shift at the paper mill, working nights now. He left the house at 10 in the evening and returned at 7 in the morning. He slept during the day. This schedule meant the family rarely ate meals together, rarely occupied the same room at the same time. When they passed each other in the hallway, they exchanged pleasantries. How was work? Fine. Did you eat? Yes. Conversations that said nothing. The daughter began having nightmares. She never told her father, but she told a friend who later spoke to investigators. In the dreams, she was searching for something she could not find. She was opening doors in a house that seemed familiar but was somehow wrong. Behind every door was another door. She woke up gasping, her heart racing. She started keeping a journal, writing down her thoughts and fears in the privacy of her locked bedroom. Those journal entries would eventually become important. The son developed what his school counselor described as emotional flatness. He showed little affect, little enthusiasm, little interest in activities he had previously enjoyed. He had played basketball before his mother disappeared, but he quit the team. He had friends, but he stopped returning their calls. His grades remained adequate but unremarkable. Teachers noted his withdrawal but attributed it to grief. No one looked deeper. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison continued her work quietly. She had not forgotten Cathy Ensor. She reviewed the file every few months, hoping something new would emerge. Some witness who had been silent might come forward. Some piece of evidence might reveal itself. She drove out to Old Route 220 occasionally, standing at the spot where the car had been found, trying to understand what had happened there. The road had not changed. Traffic passed infrequently. The woods remained thick and silent. In November 2008, nearly 3 years after Cathy's disappearance, James Ensor began dating someone. Her name was Sharon Becker, a woman he had met at a grocery store. She was kind, soft-spoken, recently divorced. She knew about his missing wife but chose to see past it, to see the man she believed he was. They went to movies. They had dinner at restaurants in Altoona. The children met her once briefly. Both were polite but distant. The daughter told her brother later, "I don't trust it." The brother said nothing, just nodded. The relationship ended after 3 months. Sharon later told a friend that something had felt wrong, though she could not articulate what exactly. She said James was attentive and respectful, but there was something absent in him, some emotional core that seemed hollow. She said it felt like being with someone who was performing the role of a person rather than being one. She ended things gently, and James accepted it without argument. The daughter turned 21 in March 2009. She moved out of the rental house and into an apartment with a friend from college. She took with her only what fit in her car, leaving behind most of her childhood belongings. She hugged her brother goodbye but did not embrace her father, instead offering a stiff handshake. She drove away and did not look back at the house in her rearview mirror. The son, now 18 and in his final semester of high school, remained alone with his father. The house felt even emptier with his sister gone. He spent more time away, staying at friends' houses, joining clubs at school just to have somewhere to be. He graduated in June and announced he had enlisted in the military. His father seemed neither surprised nor particularly emotional about this news. He simply said, "If that's what you want." The son left for basic training in August. James Ensor now lived alone in the rental house. He continued working at the mill. He paid his bills on time. He maintained the property adequately. He existed in a kind of stasis, his life seemingly on pause, waiting for something that never arrived. Neighbors in the apartment complex barely knew him. He was polite when encountered but never social. He never invited anyone over. No one knew what went on inside that apartment. In October 2010, the daughter made a phone call. She dialed Detective Lisa Morrison's direct line at the state police barracks. Her voice shook as she identified herself. She said, "I need to talk to you about my mother. I need to tell you what I remember." Detective Morrison grabbed a notebook and pen. She said, "I'm listening." Part 4, The Revelation. The daughter's name was Amanda. She sat across from Detective Morrison in an interview room at the state police barracks on a gray afternoon in late October. 4 years and 8 months had passed since her mother's disappearance. Amanda was 22 years old now, working full-time and taking evening classes. She had brought with her a box containing her old journals, years of handwritten entries that she had kept hidden in her apartment. She began by saying, "I don't know if what I remember is real or if I've constructed it in my mind over the years, but I can't carry it anymore." Detective Morrison assured her that whatever she said would be taken seriously, that they would examine everything carefully. She asked Amanda to start from the beginning, from the day her mother disappeared. Amanda took a breath. She opened one of the journals, though she did not read from it yet. She said, "I wasn't at school that morning. I told everyone I was, but I wasn't. I had skipped first period to meet a friend at a coffee shop. I came home around 10:30 because I forgot a textbook I needed for my afternoon class. I thought no one would be there. My dad was supposed to be at work. My brother was supposed to be sick in bed. My mom was supposed to be out running errands." She paused. Detective Morrison waited. "But when I pulled up to the house, my dad's truck was in the driveway. I remember being confused. I parked on the street and sat in my car for a minute, wondering if I should just leave because I didn't want to explain why I wasn't at school. But I really needed that textbook, so I went inside." Amanda's hands trembled slightly. She continued, "The house was quiet. I thought maybe no one was home, that my dad had gotten a ride to work with someone, but then I heard voices from the basement. The door to the basement was slightly open. I heard my dad's voice. He was talking, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard my mom. She sounded upset. She said something like, 'You can't keep doing this.' And my dad said, 'I can do whatever I want.'" Detective Morrison leaned forward slightly. "Did you go downstairs?" "No," I froze. "I stood at the top of the stairs. I heard more talking, but it was quieter, like they had moved to the other end of the basement. Then I heard a sound, a thud, like something heavy falling. Then silence, complete silence." "What did you do?" "I ran. I went back to my car and I drove away. I was terrified. I didn't know what I had heard. I convinced myself I had misunderstood, that they were just arguing about something normal. I went to school. I went to my afternoon classes. When I came home that evening, there were police cars everywhere. They told me my mom was missing. My dad was there. He looked at me and I looked at him, and I knew I should say something about what I heard. But I was 17 years old and I was scared and I loved my dad, and I told myself I must have been wrong. Over the following weeks, Detective Morrison worked carefully with Amanda. They went through the journals, which contained cryptic entries dating back to months after the disappearance. One entry from August 2006 read, "Sometimes I wonder if silence is the same as lying. Sometimes I wonder if I saw something I don't remember seeing." Another from January 2007, "In my dreams, the basement door is always open." Amanda also revealed that her younger brother, now serving overseas, had begun asking her questions about that day. He had called her 6 months earlier and said, "Do you remember anything weird about the day Mom disappeared?" She had deflected then, but the conversation had haunted her. Detective Morrison contacted the son, whose name was Daniel. After several secure phone calls, arranged through military channels, Daniel confirmed something that made the investigation focus sharply on James Ensor. Daniel said that on February 14, 2006, he had not actually been in his room all morning. He had gone downstairs around 9:15, hopping to ask his mother for money for a video game. He heard voices in the basement. He heard his father say, "You're not going anywhere." Daniel had retreated back upstairs, frightened by the tone in his father's voice. He had gotten back into bed and pulled the covers over his head. Both children had carried these fragments of memory for years, each thinking they were alone in their suspicions, each too afraid to speak. On December 3, 2010, Detective Morrison obtained a search warrant for the rental property where James Ensor lived. A team of forensic specialists executed the warrant at 6 in the morning. James was home, having just returned from his night shift. He answered the door calmly and did not resist. He asked what this was about. Detective Morrison said, "We're investigating your wife's disappearance. We have new information." The forensic team spent 14 hours processing the apartment. They found nothing of immediate value there, as expected. But the warrant also covered James's work truck and allowed investigators to search the property on Morrison Street, where the family had lived in 2006. The current owners gave permission for the search. At the old house in the basement, investigators used luminol to check for biological material. The basement had been renovated since the Ensors moved out. New drywall had been installed, but in one corner behind a storage shelf, the original concrete floor remained. When luminol was applied, a large area approximately 4 feet by 6 feet glowed blue under ultraviolet light. Blood. A significant amount despite attempts to clean it. DNA analysis would take weeks, but investigators had enough to bring James Ensor in for questioning. On December 10th, he sat in the same interview room where his daughter had sat weeks before. Detective Morrison was present, along with a state police investigator named Carl Webb. They presented him with the evidence, the luminol findings, the testimony from his children, the timeline that had never made sense. His alibi at the paper mill had covered the afternoon, but the morning remained unaccounted for. They had checked and found that James had called in sick to his supervisor around 8 that morning, saying he would be late. He had clocked in at 9:55, more than enough time to be home when Cathy returned from the gas station. James Ensor sat silently for several minutes. Then he said, "I want a lawyer." The interview ended, but investigators continued building the case. They re-examined Cathy's car. Using more advanced forensic techniques available in 2010 that had not been available in 2006, they found microscopic blood spatter on the inside of the driver's side door panel, hidden in the seam of the upholstery. The blood matched Cathy's DNA. The theory that emerged was this: James had been home that morning. An argument had occurred in the basement, likely about something in their marriage that had gone unspoken for years. The argument escalated. Cathy was struck, perhaps pushed. She fell. The injury was catastrophic. James panicked. He cleaned the basement as best he could. He placed Cathy's body in her own car and drove it to Old Route 220, a location he knew well from his youth. He staged the scene to look like an abduction. He walked back through the woods to a secondary road where he had previously left his work truck. He drove to the paper mill and arrived by 10, maintaining his alibi for the rest of the day. But where was Cathy's body? That question remained unanswered. Investigators believed James had returned to Old Route 220 that night or in the days following and moved the body to a permanent location. Despite extensive searches, including ground-penetrating radar surveys of properties James had access to, the body was never recovered. On March 7, 2011, James Ensor was arrested and charged with the elimination of his wife. The arrest took place at the paper mill during his shift change. He did not resist. Witnesses said he looked almost relieved. The trial began in October 2011. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the testimony from Amanda and Daniel, and a timeline that showed James had the opportunity. They called coworkers from the medical office where Cathy worked who testified that she had confided in one of them months before her disappearance that her marriage had become distant, that James had become controlling about finances and her movements. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the blood in the basement and in the car could have been from previous incidents, that the children's memories were unreliable after so many years. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On November 2, 2011, they returned a verdict, guilty. James Ensor showed no visible reaction. He stood and faced the judge as the verdict was read. Amanda and Daniel sat in the courtroom, holding hands. When the verdict was announced, Amanda closed her eyes and let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. James Ensor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, the judge said, "You have deprived this community of a valued member, deprived 2 children of their mother, and compounded the tragedy by forcing your own children to carry the burden of your actions for years. The court finds no mitigating circumstances." James never confessed. He never revealed the location of Cathy's body. He was transferred to a state correctional facility where he remains today. Amanda and Daniel both gave victim impact statements. Amanda read from one of her journals. She said, "For years I thought I was going crazy. For years I doubted my own memory. Now I know the truth. My mother deserved better. She deserved to be found. She deserved justice. And even though we don't have her back, even though we'll never lay her to rest properly, at least we have truth." Daniel, speaking via video link from his military base, simply said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I was a kid. I was scared. I hope wherever Mom is, she knows we finally did right by her." The community of Roaring Spring reacted with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Those who had suspected James felt a grim satisfaction that their instincts had been correct. Those who had defended him struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the man who had been convicted. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of silence, about the importance of trusting one's instincts, about the long shadow that violence casts over families. Cathy Ensor's body has never been found. Her family holds out hope that someday, somehow, information will emerge that will lead them to her. They have established a scholarship in her name at the local high school, awarded annually to a student pursuing a career in healthcare, honoring the work Cathy did in life. Her photograph, the same one that hung on posters throughout Blair County in 2006, sits in the display case at the school alongside the scholarship announcement. Closing. The case of Cathy Ensor represents more than a crime solved after years of uncertainty. It represents the courage of two young people who carried an unbearable weight and finally chose truth over fear. It represents the dedication of investigators who refused to let a case fade into obscurity. It represents a community that had to confront the reality that violence can hide behind ordinary faces, in ordinary homes, on ordinary streets. Cathy Ensor was 42 years old when her life ended in that basement on Morrison Street. She will always be 42. She will never see her children marry or hold her grandchildren. She will never tend another garden or volunteer at another school event. But she is not forgotten. In Roaring Spring, people still remember her kindness, her quiet presence, her smile. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.